Start, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Rajiv sir, Mohit sir, everyone over there. I am Jigesh Vaidya. As you all know me, I am an intensivist in Nirmal Hospital. Today, we are going to discuss about COVID-19 and MISC, that called multi-inflammatory system syndrome in children related to COVID-19. So, this COPA presentation is adolescent age group that closely matches the adults in management. Children that markedly differ than adults in management. Some management point, pathophysiological basis of the treatment, and there are and will be gray areas in the management that can be dealt with one-to-one basis. Hello.
सुन रहा है, आ रही है, everything is fine.
आ रही है ना?
हाँ, आ रही है,
We can hear you.
Okay, sir. The basis of treatment, pathology basis, as you can see, there are two phases of this illness. One is viremia and second is immune response. So, deterioration in this COVID-19 is mainly due to hyperinflammatory immune phase. So, antiviral drug has very less, what you can say, limited, limited role in the management, because most of the deterioration is because of hyperinflammatory immune phase. Cytokine release leads to inflammation of endothelium, of pulmonary vessels and pulmonary epithelium. And at initial phase, antithrombotic agents, steroids, and anticytokine drug will help. So that early aggressive treatment can prevent the progression to classic ARDS. But once the classic ARDS develop, there are very less chance that any therapy will work. So we have to identify the early pulmonary phase where our treatment can be beneficial. Once classic ARDS develop, no therapy will usually work. Patient then go into a pulmonary fibrotic phase, and then they eventually succumb to the illness. So in this figure, you can see that there is an incubation period. Once patient get exposed to the virus, he or she take around 3 days after getting their initial infection to become infectious and start spreading the disease. And on an average, it will take around 6.4 days. 6.4 days to symptoms to be start. So we can see that day 1 of symptom onset, but to reach that day 1, it is around, on an average, 6.4 to 7 days will require. Non-respiratory symptoms. So symptomatic non-respiratory phase, and after that there is a symptomatic respiratory phase. So in symptomatic non-pulmonary phase or non-respiratory phase, where our antiviral medication can work, and when in symptomatic pulmonary phase, that is a phase of immune dysregulation, thrombophilia, anti-inflammatory medication usually will require. And as you can see, the GGO, which we classically described in CT chest, starts appearing from day 1 of symptom onset, and that gradually increases. So when we talk about symptomatic non-pulmonary phase, it is consistent of cold, cough, fever, malaise, headache, myalgia, loose motion. These are the common symptoms in symptomatic non-pulmonary phase. And following this symptom, this phase lasts around 7 to 8 days. And following these symptoms, patient recover over a period of next 5 to 7 days. Some remain totally asymptomatic during this phase, and 85% of patients recover during this phase only, or after this phase only, due to innate immunity, right? In this phase, there is pathologically predominant viremia, and antiviral therapy or antibody therapy can work in this phase. After that comes the symptomatic pulmonary phase. In symptomatic pulmonary phase, there is a prothrombotic state, like hyper D-dimer levels are elevated, hyperinflammatory stage where your CRP, ferritin, IL-6 elevated, there is a macrophage activation, all that lead, all this cytokine storm lead to inflammation of pulmonary vascular endothelium and pulmonary epithelium, and then that lead to hypoxemia. So in symptomatic pulmonary phase, there is a onset of respiratory symptom like fast breathing, drop in saturation below or equal to 94%. Two pathological processes mainly lead to this pulmonary thrombosis and immune dysregulation, and immune dysregulation can manifest as cytokine storm macrophage activation. This pulmonary phase further divided into two phases, early and late. So early is L type. There is a very low elastase, and invasive ventilation should be avoided as much as possible in this phase. And anti-inflammatory and anti-thrombotic therapy plays a major role. As the disease progresses, if sometimes when we intervene in this phase on also, when we give anti-inflammatory anti-thrombotic therapy, we do give everything. But despite all of our effort, if this phase progress, then it lead to late pulmonary phase. That is a H type of disease, and where there is a very high elastase and that behave classically like classical ARDS. So where your ventilation is like classical ARDS, but after that, some patient can recover from this or other when really go on into pulmonary fibrotic phase. So why this happen? So there is a concurrent insufficient type 1 interferon response is the peculiarity of this SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 infection. There are too little and too late type 1 interferon response, along with aberrant pro-inflammatory chemokine secretion, especially interleukin 6. So as you can see, there's a pro-inflammatory chemokine, this is a cytokine, interleukin 6. So that lead to all this pathophysiology, and severity of disease is due to immune dysregulation rather than the level of viremia. Viremia is initial, but some patient with low viral load also can have a severe inflammatory response. So there are broad steps in clinical decision making. Step 1 is to classify the patient based on clinical spectrum and investigation. Step 2 is to identify the patient with comorbid condition. In adolescent age group, we nowadays see that there are many obese patients, there are diabetic patients, obese patient with BMI of more than 25, some of having a CRF or anything, patient of malignancy that has immunocompromised status. Some are survivor of congenital heart disease. Some are of PPHN patient that survive that long. So cardiovascular, pulmonologic patient and neuro condition patient. These patients are comorbid. This comorbid condition is a high risk condition. And third, there are 3 types of patients which we commonly encountered in our routine practice. That patients, type 1 patient is having already done a baseline test within 3 days of presentation with the help of family or with the advice of family physician or their regular physician. Second group who presenting for the first time within first 7 days or after 7 days, pulmonary phase, non-pulmonary phase, but they are presenting for the first time. And third group who have self-medicated with the help of Google or with the help of doctor. They have taken steroids under the supervision and now have deterioration and came to us, right? So after we take a broad steps, we have to do an investigation. So baseline investigation in some routine in every patient is CBC, CRP, blood group, D-dimer, LDH, and ferritin. And in a high risk patient, depending upon the underlying comorbid condition, like hemoglobin, the HbA1c, RFT, LFT, TROPI, thyroid function test, and optionals are blood culture, CPK, pro-BNP, dengue NS1 antigen, all that we have to do, depending upon the patient's condition on case-to-case basis. Now, in some patients who are very high risk or developing a high risk feature, we have to do a CBC daily with differential leukocyte count, absolute lymphocyte count, LFT, BUN, creatinine, electrolyte, LDH, and every third day we have to repeat CRP, D-dimer, ferritin. This has to be decided with the clinical condition and disease course. CRP can be taken as a surrogate marker of IL-6 because IL-6 is costly. So CRP can be taken as a surrogate marker of IL-6. And no single marker should be chased without correlating with clinical sign and symptoms. Like if we take example of D-dimer, if D-dimer level is more than 1 microgram per milliliter, as per a dose of heparin, but D-dimer can be elevated in some cases like pregnancy, malignancy, trauma, underlying liver disease, underlying heart disease, or a sepsis, or as a result of hemodialysis, or a CPR, or a recent surgery. So D-dimer value should be traced, but should be taken underlying comorbid conditions. If we take other marker like CRP more than 100, IL-6 more than 80, ferritin more than 700, LDH more than 3 to 6 times baseline elevated, and with along with clinical features like increase in oxygen requirement, breathlessness, that predict the cytokine storm. So at that stage, antithrombotic medication, anti-cytokine medication should be used. Along with that, if the ferritin is out of proportion and elevated, like more than 4,000, 10,000, like no and associated very high grade fever, and along with that new pulmonological or neurological sign, that can indicate associated HLH. At that, so that we can use anakinra and all that medication if we found out that. But we have to do with clinical context. Not only value should be followed. Now we classify the patient. This is for adolescent patient. This is not for children. If we classify the patient in mild, moderate, and severe, if we do saturation more than 94% in a room air, mild, 90 to 94 in room air, it is moderate, and less than 90% in room air, it is severe. If we take the respiratory rate less than 24 is a mild, moderate 24 to 30, and severe we can say more than 30, respiratory rate is 30. If we take the saturation after 6 minute walk, right? If the drop is more than 4 or baseline less than 94, it comes in a moderate strategy. In mild, that is not so much of significance, but if more than 94 on room air and if we ask the patient to walk for 6 minutes and the saturation drops below 94, then it comes in a moderate phase. If saturation already below 90% on room air, this phase is not indicated. If they use the CT chest criteria for mild, moderate, and severe, on a CT chest, no pneumonia on a mild in mild cases. The lung involvement that is normal or less than 25%, so we can call it a CORAD grade 1. In moderate cases, there are the +1 pneumonia, what radiologists routinely reported nowadays in COVID. Involvement is 24 to 75%. It's a grade 2 to grade 3 or 4 CORAD, and in severe cases, pneumonia they report +2 and involvement is 75 to 100%, and then grade 4, grade 5. Right? So CT chest criteria is this. If we look at the clinical targets and red flag sign, like so shift the patient to HDU or ICU, or we need to increase the support whenever wherever area patient is admitted. The clinical targets or red flag sign is like chest pain, breathlessness, heaviness in chest, mental confusion, decreased urine output, poor oral intake, or persistent vomiting, drop in saturation from baseline. If all that is happening, then we have to shift the patient to HDU. If it is in a ward, in a moderate cases, already patient is in HDU, then target saturation in 92 to 96% with the help of oxygen, NRM or HFNC or everything, and we have to constantly look for the respiratory distress, work of breathing, accessory muscles of respiration. There are need to give more oxygen to maintain the saturation level, everything, and already patient is in ICU. Then we have to look for the other sign of shock and everything. So if we need to increase the vasoactive support and everything, we have to do that. These are the red flag sign we have to keep in mind. We are routinely monitoring the patient in this way only in our ICU, in our ward. But this is just to summarize the thing. If we look at the laboratory test, particularly in COVID-19, neutrophil lymphocyte ratio less than 3.5 is normal, more than 5.5 is significant. It is pre-steroids. CRP less than 40 milligram per liter is significant, normal, but more than 100 and rising is significant. Ferritin less than 500 nanogram per milliliter is normal, but more than 700 and rising is significant. As D-dimer less than 0.5 is normal, more than 1 is drew our attention. LDH less than 300 is normal, but more than 400 and rising is significant. And IL-6 less than 400, less than 4.8, but more is normal, but more than 80 and rising is sign of cytokine storm. Now we look at the treatment part in adolescent age group and in adult also. These are a recommendation from the government of India and
Hello. जिगेश.
हाँ सर कट हो गया.
ओके.
सर मैं वापस में ज्वाइन करता हूँ. ये शायद स्क्रीन तेरे बंद हो गया होगा. आ रहा है सर अभी?
आ गया.
So the drugs which are used in all till now we are using and recommended by government is that hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, doxycycline, erythromycin if only secondary infection suspected. Benefits till date are not proven and hydroxychloroquine is not indicated less than 15 years of age. So if you look at the dosing of hydroxychloroquine, it is a day one 400 milligram twice a day, followed by 200 milligram twice a day for 4 days. We have to avoid it if in a cardiac disease and or in a when a QTC is more than 480 milliseconds. If the person is already on a prophylaxis, then only we have to give a 200 milligram twice a day, 4 days. Or person is not tolerating this hydroxychloroquine, then we have to give a ivermectin with doxycycline. Ivermectin single dose 12 milligram and with doxycycline 100 milligram twice a day for 5 days. Look at the anticoagulation. In mild cases, if you classify the patient as a mild disease, you have to give anticoagulation only in a high risk group patient, like patient with comorbid condition. That is injection enoxaparin 40 milligrams subcutaneous once a day, or a deltaparin. If the patient is of end-stage renal disease, then we have to give an unfractionized heparin. In moderate and severe, the doses remain the same. Only in severe, we have to give a twice a day doses and titrate dose according to a value of D-dimer. There exists a contraindication for this treatment. If the Hasbled score is more than 3, that indicates the bleeding, high risk of bleeding. And what this Hasbled score is: hypertension, abnormal renal function, abnormal liver function. If the patient is having a stroke, labile INR, fluctuating INR, and patient is alcoholic. I'm sure in adolescent age group in our country, alcohol is not the one of the major problem, but all other things we have to look for. This heparin is also contraindicated if there is an active bleeding or there is emergency surgery is planned in a COVID-19 patient, or platelet count is less than 20,000, or blood pressure is more than 200 by 120 millimeter of mercury, and fibrinogen level is less than 0.5 gram per liter. LMWH is not contraindicated even if the coagulation tests are abnormal. Like prolonged PTA-PTT is not a contraindication to give a low molecular weight heparin. Steroids in mild cases, when there is a no oxygen requirement, there is no role of steroid. Even it can harm during viremia phase. In moderate to severe cases, we have to give steroids. In moderate cases, injection dexamethasone 0.1 to 0.2 milligram per kg or a 6 milligram IV once a day for 3 to 5 days, or methylprednisolone to avoid dexamethasone if remdesivir is planned, because remdesivir and the steroid has a interaction. In severe cases, we have to increase the dose of steroid from 0.1 to 0.2 to 0.2 to 0.4, or methylprednisolone we can from 40 to 60 it can given to 80 milligram. The patient with an increasing CRP or worsening clinical status, we can give 80 milligram twice a day also, then titrate it down. But we have to we should not delay the first dose of steroid once indicated. If the admission is delayed, then we can start with oral steroid. Now, respiratory support in early, moderate cases, severe cases, mild cases do not require respiratory support, because if the respiratory support is required, then it's converted into moderate cases. So, whenever in a COVID care center or other facilities, isolation facilities, if patient is there, start showing requirement of oxygen or saturation is falling, we have to make sure that ICU backup is available, and after making the an arrangement of bed and transportation, we should transport the patient to that facility. In early phases, oxygen by non-breathing mask or a high flow nasal cannula or simple nasal cannula we can use, and apply surgical mask or N95 mask over it. Try to avoid intubation at this stage. And rescue therapy like awake prone ventilation, anti-cytokine drugs like tocilizumab and remdesivir antiviral drug can be given at this stage. And if the requirement is more, if patient is deteriorating very fast, then on initial on NRM or a high flow nasal cannula or on a BiPAP, we can gradually escalate the support. And all support is, if all supports are failing, then we have to use the invasive mechanical ventilation and give ventilation according to a ARDS protocol. Now, prone ventilation. The role of awake proning is proven in ARDS also, in this COVID-19 also. Awake proning is done if the saturation is less than 94% on FiO2 of 40%, either a Venturi or a NRM or a high flow nasal cannula. We can do a 30 to 120 minutes of prone, then 30 to 120 minutes of left lateral, then right lateral, and then upright. It is contraindicated in patients with altered mental status, hemodynamic instability, pregnancy, abdominal wound, unstable pelvic or spinal lesion. And before proning, FiO2 should be increased to 100% for 5 minutes. If patient is already ventilated, then prone ventilation should be tried 16 to 18 hours per day. And when to start proning? When PF ratio is less than 150 with FiO2 requirement of more than 0.6 and PWP of more than 5 centimeter of water. And when to stop proning? When PF this PF ratio exceeds more than 150 with FiO2 of less than 0.6 and PWP of less than 6. Now, therapy of respiratory condition and complication. Favipiravir can be used in mild condition if the patient belongs to high risk group. Mild condition, but with high risk group within 10 days of symptom onset. And initially they show that it is lead to symptomatic and radiological improvement, but the pill burden is very more and it's quite a cumbersome. You have to take 1,800 milligrams, then 9 tablets twice a day on day 1, and then 4 tablets twice a day daily up to day 7 to day 14. So initially they thought that favipiravir is useful, but now the evidences are equivocal. Some says give it, some says do not give it. In a moderate cases, remdesivir can be used with a high risk group within 12 days of symptom onset. If the saturation is 94, that the patient fits in a criteria of moderate disease, that 200 milligram IV once a day on day 1, and then 100 milligram IV once a day for 4 days, total of 5 days. These are antiviral medication. Both medication are contraindicated if there is a transaminitis. Favipiravir is contraindicated if there is a prolonged QT or PR interval, 2nd or 3rd degree heart block and arrhythmia, blood uric acid level is elevated, there is a diarrhea, decreased neutrophil count, and patient has psychiatric symptoms. Remdesivir is contraindicated in pregnancy and lactation and severe in renal impairment. When we give remdesivir, during infusion, we have to watch for hypotension and sweating. And remdesivir is having interaction with hydroxychloroquine and dexamethasone. So all new evidence are saying that hydroxychloroquine is not useful. Only dexamethasone out of all drugs have clinical science backing, all RCT backing. Otherwise, remdesivir has some positive favor. Otherwise, all drugs are right now is having a debatable role in management of COVID-19. The patient is having coagulopathy who is actively bleeding. Then we have to transfer the platelets. The platelet count is less than 40,000. 4 unit of FFP if INR is above 1.8, and cryoprecipitate if fibrinogen is less than 1.5 gram. Now, very hype and whatever we can say, plasma therapy. Initially, it is very promising, and everyone is saying that plasma therapy should work. So plasma therapy, if we have to give, there will be moderate disease before 10 days of symptom. It is that if we have to check the IgG level of patient, if not detectable, only then plasma should be given. And donor eligibility is donor should be 18 to 16-year-old with weight of more than 55 kg without uncontrollable comorbidity. Male or nulliparous female who are recovered from COVID-19 for minimum of 14 days and PCR negative before donation. If 20 days pass, then no RT-PCR is required, and IgG antibody ratio should be more than 1:640. Should be avoided in IgG deficiency and immunoglobulin deficiency. Dose is 4 to 13 ml per kg, usually 200 milligram single dose. Other dose can be given after 24 hours. But nowadays, the evidence is emerging that this conventional plasma therapy is also not working. So clinically, clinicians all across, when we are interacting, is said that it is working. We should continue trying it. But RCT failed to show any commendable benefit with this plasma therapy. Now, salvage treatment. This salvage treatment can be used, but this treatment should be used early when there is an indication of cytokine storm, not after the classical ARDs has already been developed. Worsening respiratory distress indication is high-grade fever with chills and rigor with increasing oxygen requirement, elevated level of cytokines. Precautions is that we have to ascertain, we have to make sure that there is an absence of infection, systemic bacterial or a fungal infection. PCT is less than 0.5. ALT is less than 500. There should not be transaminitis, and platelet more than 1 lakh. And an absolute neutrophil count is more than 2,000. Contraindicated in patients and people living with HIV. So it should not be used in patient with HIV. Informed consent has to be taken with each patient. Dose is 4 to 8 milligram per kg. First dose can repeat if in 12 hours, after 12 hours, if a patient remains febrile within 24 days of initial dose. The IL-6 level should not be repeated immediately after giving tocilizumab, because it will bound to elevated after first dose of tocilizumab. Another drug, if tocilizumab is not available, is that itolizumab can be given. It is a humanized IgI monoclonal antibody. Egg-bite binding of CD6, down-regulate T-cell activation, reduction of pro-inflammatory cytokine. It should not be used in patients with hepatic or renal impairment. The mechanism of action of itolizumab and tocilizumab are different. And infusion dose is 1.6 milligram per kg or 100 milligram over 6 hours. And second dose should be given after 7 days, if at all required. Then comes the high dose corticosteroid. This is not a routine dose corticosteroid. What we are giving is a high dose corticosteroid. 250 milligram methylprednisolone, 6 to 8 hours in patient with HLH. If features of HLH are there, plasma exchange can be tried if there is a features of HLH despite giving high dose corticosteroid therapy. thrombolysis can be done in patient with large dead space ventilation, high PaCO2 level despite of all efforts and maintaining adequate ventilation. We should consider half dose reverse recombinant tissue plasminogen activator RTPA for thrombolysis. The dosage is 25 milligram of TPA over 2 hours, followed by 25 milligram of infusion and administered for subsequent of 22 hours, and dose should not exceed 0.9 milligram per kg, and they should be followed by full anticoagulation. Now, cytosol filter, it can be used if the institute is having CRRT machine. We are using CRRT machine in one of the in our patients. We can use this cytosol filter. Drawback is very costly, but it can be used for a marked reduction in cytokine storm and inflammation to improve lung function, and incrementation can be weaned and reversal of septic shock. Indication is not very well defined, but refractory oxygenation and refractory cytokine storm, despite giving this tocilizumab and itolizumab and everything. Drawback is it can clear anti-inflammatory cytokine HCQ and azithromycin, but it is not clearing this tocilizumab and plasma antibodies. So it can be used. It can be tried after one-to-one discussion with the patients or parents of patients. Anakinra, it is another drug. It can be used if there are the high chances of HLH-like feature, and patient is showing disproportionately elevated level of this ferritin. It competitively inhibits IL-1 binding to interleukin-1 type receptor. Refractory HLH, as I have said, 100 milligram bolus followed by 2 milligram per kg per day infusion for 24 hours. And ECMO, we all fond of ECMO in ARDS, but ECMO role is debatable in case of COVID-19 ARDS because unlike typical ARDS, this patient do not progress into resolution phase. Rather than they went into severe fibroproliferative phase and went into dependency. So ECMO in this patient would serve a very little purpose. But the younger patients of less than 60 years of age and without any comorbid condition and clinically fit criteria, like there are multi-organ, brain is preserved and heart is preserved, and there are chances that patients may come out. It can be used after one-to-one discussion with all consultants and with the relatives. When patient is improving, like patient is improved after initial cytokine storm or after went into ARDS, weaning of therapy, abrupt weaning of steroid is not recommended due to rebound symptoms. Clinically, there should be decrease in respiratory rate, breathlessness, and oxygen requirement. If D-dimer ferritin normal after 3 days, we can shift to oral prednisolone and gradually taper. If patient is receiving high dose methylprednisolone for HLH, reduce the dose by 15% once the ferritin is reduced by the 40% of highest value. And anticoagulation may be continued for 2 weeks after discharge till the D-dimer and every value is become normal. And discharge criteria, if patient is having a milder symptom, the 10 days from symptom onset, and patient should be afebrile for minimum of 24 hours without help of antipyretic. And RT-PCR repeat is not required in mild cases. In moderate cases also, there should be no fever and breathlessness for 72 hours and no drop in saturation less than 90% after a minimal walk of oxygen. And 10 days should be passed from a symptom onset. RT-PCR not required. In a severe cases, the criteria is same, but after clinical recovery, RT-PCR is repeated. And if swab negative, then patient can be transferred to non-COVID area or discharged to home, depending upon a clinical condition. So this is all about adolescent age group, which we encounter. with if a active COVID-19 infection. Adolescent patient can be encountered in MISC also, that we can now we are going on that. Now management in children with active COVID-19 also and with MISC also. So children with active COVID-19 can be present with gastrointestinal symptom most likely with vomiting and diarrhea, or a vomiting diarrhea with fever. Severe cases of pediatric COVID-19 has two kinds of presentation. First one is typical cytokine storm like in adult, but with predominant HLH-like feature. And second is MISC with various kind of presentation from mild inflammation to severe shock with multi-organ involvement. In many patient overlap there will be overlap of feature of COVID-19 with cytokine storm, HLH, MISC, and Kawasaki disease. Inflammatory pathology more likely to be in a lung, and markers of systemic inflammation are less compared to those HLH and MISC if there is a active COVID-19 and presentation limited to lung only. If we classify the pediatric age group, not adolescent, pediatric age group in a mild, moderate, and severe. In mild cases, there is no CN requirement. In moderate cases, there may be some dyspnea. We have to go according to age-wise respiratory rate, and saturation is 90-94% on a room air. In a severe cases, there can be present a saturation of less than 90 with severe respiratory distress. Danger signs like inability to breastfeed, lethargy, unconscious, convulsion, ARDS, septic shock, and multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. Parents should be trained to recognize the red flag sign like difficulty in breathing, for infant grunting, inability to breastfeed, cyanosis, good discoloration of lip and face, chest pain, confusion, not interacting when awake, and inability to drink. In mild cases, management is very much supportive only. Paracetamol, zinc, vitamin C. No antiviral therapy should be offered in pediatric age group. Remdesivir is only allowed for a compassionate use in a very critical patient. And dose for more than 3.5 to less than 40 kg patient is 5 mg per kg loading. Then 2.5 mg per kg once a day for 5 days, and more than 40 kg like adolescent or adult. For a moderate to severe cases, anticoagulation, there are no recommendation like adolescent and adult, but there are 2 or 3 indications. Indication one is patients with indwelling central line or a peripheral central venous catheter. They're like patients of malignancy who have already central venous line or port line or everything. Then we can use the enoxaparin for less than 2 months, 0.75 mg per kg per dose, 12 hourly. More than 2 months, 0.5 mg per kg per dose, 12 hourly, and we should target the anti-TNF factor target. For high risk and critically ill patient without the central line also, but patient with hyperinflammatory stage, we'll come to that later, with a hyperinflammatory state. In that patients of less than 2 months, 1.5 mg per kg per dose, 12 hourly, and more than 2 months, 1 mg per kg per dose, 12 hourly. Steroids, the patient require respiratory support, both any kind of simple oxygen requirement or invasive ventilation requirement, or a patient with a mild disease only, but having underlying chronic steroid treatment, underlying conditions that require a chronic steroid treatment, then steroid should be started. Dexamethasone 0.15 mg per kg once a day for 10 days, or a prednisolone 1 mg per kg once a day for 10 days, or a methylprednisolone 0.8 mg per kg once a day for 10 days. Rescue therapies like tocilizumab, anakinra, convalescent plasma therapy, ECMO should be on a case-to-case basis. But whenever we want to start this tocilizumab or anakinra, we have to make sure that patient is not having underlying severe bacterial, fungal, or tuberculosis infection, because that can be flare up very fast and we can lose the patient because of medication rather than because of disease. So tocili, if we want to use, we can use less than 30 kg, 12 milligram per kg, maximum 800 milligram, and more than 30 kg, 8 milligram per kg as a single dose, and may repeat dose in more than after 12 hours if patient remain febrile. Plasma exchange in critically ill children with COVID-19, if thrombocytopenia associated with multiple organ failure, like TEMOF, and 2 or more organ of failing at a count less than 1 lakh, we can use a plasma exchange. And ECMO should be considered in pediatric age group to manage ARDS or a cardiac failure, because pediatric age group also have this myocarditis, arrhythmia, and pulmonary embolism if conventional treatment fails. Now we come to MISC. When we should consider suspect the patient with MISC, if there is a persistent fever, there are signs of inflammation like neutrophilia, elevated CRP, lymphopenia. There is evidence of single or multi-organ dysfunction, shock, cardiac, respiratory, renal, gastrointestinal disorder with additional features, with full or partial criteria fulfilling for Kawasaki disease. There should be exclusion of any other microbial cause like bacterial sepsis, staphylococcal or staphylococcal shock syndrome, and infection associated with myocarditis. So this exclusion is for definition, but we can suspect MISC with this kind of features. If you have persistent fever, signs of inflammation, any or the single or multi-organ dysfunction, and partial or full criteria for Kawasaki disease. If you look at the definition for MISC, what WHO and CDC has given, almost definition is same, but only thing is CDC has classified MISC in children who require hospitalization. In WHO definition, they don't have such prerequisite for a definition of MISC, right? They don't require to be hospitalized for MISC, but serology, positive serology should be there, or a concomitant RT-PCR or rapid antigen test should be positive. So any of them should be, the requirement is there. Or there can be a definite history of contact with individual having COVID-19 infection. So there is a very busy slide is this, but this summarizes the whole of pediatric with COVID-19 spectrum. First, there is a COVID-19 acute infection, asymptomatic or mild symptom. This patient only requires symptomatic treatment. This MISC symptom, that after 2 to 4 weeks of COVID-19 infection, high-grade fever, vomiting, pain in abdomen, and rash. And third is hyperimmune phase during acute COVID-19. Features are similar like MISC, but this is associated with acute COVID-19 in infection, and with viremia phase like adult, and then hyperimmune or hyperinflammatory stage, and we have to treat it with immunomodulator, anti-inflammatory drug, and antiviral drug. If we now look at this multi-system hyperinflammatory syndrome like MISC, there are 3 kind of, we can say 3 spectrum. One is on one side that the Kawasaki-like, not a full Kawasaki, but maybe a full Kawasaki or a partial Kawasaki-like symptoms. One is COVID-19 associated febrile inflammatory stage. Most of the patient, what I have encountered or what I get called is of this phase. COVID-19 associated febrile inflammatory stage, patient present with persistent fever and mild symptom like headache or fatigue, and particularly one organ involvement like gastrointestinal symptom, severe abdominal pain or vomiting, and inflammatory markers are elevated, CRP high, ferritin high, but other signs of multi-system involvement are lacking. Like there is no cardiac involvement, or there is no other Kawasaki-like features. So most of the patients are falling in this age group, right? In this spectrum. And second one is a severe variety, toxic shock syndrome, like classical multi-system inflammatory hyperinflammatory syndrome, in which there are signs of cardiac dysfunction, vasoplegic shock, and they have a very bad prognosis, because this kind of similar kind of patient we have encountered on Saturday. Initially, we suspected this is a dengue-like illness, severe dengue, because child fluid requirement was very high. Even after 2 or 3 liters of fluid, child is persistently hypovolemic, and patient is leaking from everywhere. Patient was bloating, but there is no improvement of blood pressure even after a full dose therapy. And because the COVID antibody report came after patient succumbed to illness, then we have classified this patient as a toxic syndrome-like features or a hyperinflammatory syndrome. But that patient has classical features like vasoplegic shock, signs of left ventricular dysfunction early on, and that patient was fluid refractory. And the patient succumbed to illness even after methylprednisolone and everything. Patient was not affording for IVIG, so that IVIG and everything was not given. But methylprednisolone was given and fluid and everything was given, but patient succumbed to illness. We encountered one patient with Kawasaki-like syndrome, like rashes all over the body and strawberry tongue and everything, but there was no coronary dilatation was there. So on that in that patient, we have given IVIG and aspirin, and that patient was recovered very well. So we can encounter all 3 spectrum, but most of the patient which CT is reporting is of center variety, COVID-19 associated febrile inflammatory state, this FIS. Most of the children are falling in that in this category. If we see the investigation in pediatric age group, whether in an active COVID-19 or in MISC, if children is less than 2 years of age, we should rule out this severe combined immunodeficiency. And for that, we would require to send CD3, CD4, CD8, CD19, NK cell and CD40 ratio. If lymphocyte count available at birth, if someone has done a CBC at birth and the count is less than 400, and the count less than 900 at 5 to 6 months, lymphopenia may be due to immunodeficiency rather than a COVID-19. So we should look after this when child is less than 2 years of age. Should rule out SCID, severe combined immunodeficiency. If another thing is that in children less than 2 years with critical disease, we have to also send the marker of familial HLH. So if we find that patient is of severe critical disease and HLH-like features are there, but in that case also we should rule out the familial HLH. So we should use CD25. Chest X-ray in all moderate to severe cases. When we suspect MISC, we should send urine analysis, coagulation, tropi, BNP or anti-pro-BNP, COVID-19 antibodies, blood culture, procalcitonin, echocardiography to rule out coronary involvement, and use abdomen. Surprisingly, some patients of MISC can have presentation like acute appendicitis or enteric fever. USG report will read multiple inflammatory lymph nodes in abdomen, features of ileitis, that is common overlap with enteric fever, and acute inflammatory appendix also. So some patient may get operated because of that. So ultrasound abdomen should be done, but we have to keep in mind that this can be a MISC. If COVID-19 antibody turns negative, then we can think of enteric and other surgical causes. Now, if you list the treatment for MISC, empirical antibiotic can be started in pediatric age group if there is a severe symptom like toxic shock syndrome like features are there. Patient is very in dire stage in a shock-like condition. We can start with antibiotic, ceftriaxone or a higher antibiotic. GI symptoms are present, then we should add metronidazole. And once cultures are negative, we should stop the antibiotic. But if we have to give this anti-cytokine drug and immunomodulator drugs, steroids and everything, we can probably continue with antibiotics to just take care of secondary infections. Now, if you use a steroid, we have to use steroid in these cases. So steroid use and tapering for a mild cases, methylprednisolone 2 mg per kg per day, maximum 40 to 60 milligram. Then tapering with switch over to prednisolone. For a moderate cases, methylprednisolone of 10 milligram per kg on a day 1, followed by 2 mg per kg, and over a period of 2 to 3 weeks, we should taper. And for the severe cases, like with requirement ICU care, we can use 30 mg per kg per day, and then gradually taper over. So this is about a steroid use. IVIG should be used in a 2 spectrum, like Kawasaki-like disease, or in a severe cases which require ICU care. For Kawasaki-like disease, with patient who don't have issue of fluid overload, we can use 2 gram per kg over 24 hours. If there is an issue of fluid overload, we can use 1 gram per kg because of cardiac dysfunction, because patient cannot tolerate sometimes a large amount of fluid. Right? We can give on a period of 48 hours if you want to use, but sometimes you taper the dose of IVIG in that cases. Aspirin should be ordered in patient with platelet count of less than 80,000. Aspirin should be started in patient with Kawasaki-like features and with coronary abnormality. Low dose aspirin, or a patient if this Z score of coronary artery is more than 10, then a high dose aspirin should be given, like 12.5 milligram. It is a dose is still less than a regular Kawasaki disease, but in cases where the Z score is more than 10, MI patient with CAA, the dose is 12.5 milligram per kg per dose. 12.5 milligram per kg per day in a this 2 divided by 3 divided doses, and for mild cases it is 3 to 5 milligram per kg per day. Possibly, if the severe variety of patient with respiratory distress, failure of steroids and cytokines, and there is a cytokine syndrome, the dose is same like acute COVID, 12 milligram per kg was less than 30 kg, and more than 30 kg, 8 milligram per kg. We can repeat the dose. Anakinra can be used in the severe variety of MISC. If you are persisting post-steroid, post-IVIG, dose is less than 20. If the weight is less than 20 kg, then 2 milligram per kg of loading dose, and that continuous infusion. There are cautions in like anaphylaxis reaction can be happen, neutropenia, eosinophilia, immunosuppression is severe, and transaminitis is there. Once the patient is improved of this MISC, what are the discharge criteria and how to do a follow-up? So clinical criteria for discharge is patient eating and drinking adequately, heart failure symptoms are controlled with oral medication, patients are without supplemental oxygen for 48 hours, no fever 48 hours, no vasopressor requirement 48 hours, echocardiography, stable or improved ventricular function, coronary abnormalities are improved, and laboratory parameters, there are persistent trend of downgrading of these inflammatory markers, right? That should be followed. Repeat echo frequency, if initial echo are normal, like heart function, left ventricular function is 50-55%, there are no coronary abnormality, then also we should repeat the echo at 1 to 2 weeks and after 4 to 6 weeks. Then after we can discontinue. But if there are coronary artery abnormalities, then 2 to 3 days until coronary abnormalities are improved, and then onwards, according to cardiologist's advice, and weekly, sometimes you have to do a very frequent echocardiography. Aspirin should be continued if there is a Kawasaki-like syndrome 4 to 6 weeks after normal echo. Low molecular heparin, if indicated, it is indicated when there is a coronary artery abnormality, Z score more than 10, or in a severe variety when there is a low EF, ventricular functions are abnormal, should be continued after 2 weeks after normal echocardiography. For a longer outpatient, if there is a CA with more than 10, then it should be continued for a prolonged period of time till abnormality, then till the Z score is tapered down, the Z score come down, or the documented thrombosis is there, then it should be continued for a longer period of time. So in summary, COVID-19 still is very less in pediatric population compared to adult population, but we have to keep a close eye on, we have to suspect in each and every patient of fever that it can be COVID-19. We have to take all precautions. More cases expected to occur as gradually everywhere there is a relaxation is happening. Though school is not starting yet, schools are not shutting yet, but park is opening gradually, malls are opening gradually. More and more children are roaming outside with parents as reduction is happening. So there are chances that more and more pediatric patients will come in our OPD and as an indoor with COVID-19. MISC is emerging, and more recommendation will come regarding to management, regarding to the treatment part as experiences grows. And MISC is usually emerging and expected when a city or a particular region experiences its peak, like adult population experiencing, and the same time adult will bring the infection at home. Children get infected at the time of active COVID-19. They may not have that kind of severe symptom, but after 2 to 4 weeks, this can be happening. So index of suspicion should be high in any child with febrile illness. Sometimes we don't get history of fever and this febrile illness or a cough and cold in patient less than less than 1 month. 1 month ago, patient has this kind of symptoms, but patient may get infected, remain asymptomatic at that period, and now present with MISC. Immunosuppression agents used should be judicious. We should define the illness first, and then after we should use this immunosuppression agent, because secondary infection in pediatric can be hidden, like hidden tuberculosis. Pediatric patient can have associated severe bacterial infection or fungal infection, and that illness can blow up out of proportion with the immunosuppression use, and we can lose the patient because of drug use rather than a infection. And follow-up is absolutely necessary for long-term consequences of this infection. We don't know the long-term follow-up of this patient because we are encountering MISC right now, but the long-term follow-up is absolutely necessary for the long-term consequences, like heart, how they are behaving after this MISC, the patient with coronary artery abnormalities, how they are behaving after that. Will they go into this thrombosis or a stricture or anything? We can only come down on a later if we follow the patient regularly. So this is all about COVID-19 and MISC. Hope I done the justice to the topic. If improvement require anything further is required, you can tell me. This is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jagesh. It was very nice in detail. So there are few questions or some comments.